here we go, and we'll have time for questions. My name is Joshua Gilliland. I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. Back in 2012, Jessica Muterson and I started this blog and podcast because we like talking about pop culture. We are here. And I just gotta say, I love Transformers. On my 10th birthday, Transformers premiered. So you can do the math on my age. And I gotta say, as we were getting ready for this, I was in trial in Modesto and Fresno. And Kate, Kathy, and Katrina took the lead in putting all of this together. And the only thing I got to say is, you got the touch. You're at your best when your back's to the wall, so thank you. So with that, let's do some introductions. And we'll start with Kate.
Hi everyone, I am Kate Bridle. I am an attorney licensed here in California. I also have a podcast called The Legal Burnouts, which is about the issue of burnout in the legal industry and beyond. So a lot of lawyers in here, check it out. I also am maybe best known for my content on TikTok and Instagram where I pretend to be in a relationship with Hannibal Lecter. So if that sounds like your kind of deal, check me out, Bridal Party of 5, both platforms.
And everyone lean in on the mics. So, Mark.
Yes, so my name is Mark Zaid. I'm a national security attorney in Washington, D.C. I represent spies. If that interests you, come to our panel on the Spy Museum tomorrow at 5 p.m. about spies and comic books. But I'm also a comic book dealer, and I'm an advisor to the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide, so it crosses over into both dimensions.
Hi, I'm Kathy Steinman. I'm a senior deputy city attorney for the city of San Diego. And also, my husband and I have a booth over in 604 where we sell vintage Transformers and G.I. Joe.
Yeah! Hi everyone, I'm Katrina Wright. I'm an associate at Best and Krieger in the Environment and Natural Resources Division, and I have absolutely nothing to plug.
My name is Mike Dennis. I'm an attorney in Modesto at Crabtree Schmidt. I met Josh on my first day of law school, and we've been friends ever since. The professor asked me what I wanted to do. I said I want to be a senator. Josh said, "The hell you are. I'm going to be the senator," and we kind of hit it off ever since.
Yeah. And we both learned, hey, that's going to be a bad idea. So we decided not to run for office. I am an attorney at Green and Pepper, Salinger, and Lally, and this is how I have fun. I do legal analysis. So let's talk about license and registration, please, for Autobots. And Kate, walk us through this.
All right, so let's start things off with a bang and talk about everyone's favorite topic, driving regulations. Really exciting, I'm ready. And that first little frame, I always think of that when people talk about registering motor vehicles, that little 30 Rock moment. Do they need licenses to operate themselves? So I started with Utah because I was like, oh, that kind of looks like Utah, right? In the first few episodes. Apparently they're supposed to be outside Portland. I'm gonna be in Portland next week and I'll report back on whether or not I see any of these kind of rock formations in the Pacific Northwest. But I looked at Oregon's laws and they were super boring, so I was like, okay, no. And Utah's laws were really interesting because when I opened them, the first thing I saw was the phrase human driver. And I was like, Optimus Prime, or Megatron, depending on your alignment, has smiled upon me today. So the Utah Code specifies that a human driver may not operate a vehicle without a license, but it actually has a specific provision about automated driving systems and says that they do not need a driver's license to operate on the road. An automated driving system is the combination of hardware and software that makes a car go in a sustained manner, and there are rankings of them, 1 to 5, different levels, 1 to 5. 1 is zero automation, 5 is fully automated. This statute applies to levels 3 through 5, and so I believe that the Transformers would probably qualify as level 5, fully automated driving systems. They'd be covered. I don't think they need licenses in Utah.
How about the great state of Nevada?
So I chose Nevada because it's where I happen to live and also it's bordering Utah. And its laws mirror a lot of the laws in the other states. Utah was the only one that I could find. I didn't research all 50 because I don't have time. I'm too busy pretending to be in a relationship with a cannibal on the internet. This seems pretty representative of the rest of the states like Minnesota, Texas, Massachusetts. And it just says that drivers have to be licensed. So driver is defined as any person in actual physical control of a vehicle upon a highway. So this kind of comes down to whether or not we would call the Transformers people. Mark's going to get a little more into the issue of personhood, I think, so I am not going to go right into that. But I will say that states in other statutes typically define person as a natural person, which is a human, or a business or corporation, because that's the world we live in. Nothing about self-aware semi-trucks or, tanks, anything like that. So I think they might have an argument that they aren't people and therefore don't have to be licensed, but I don't know how much they want to make that argument at all.
So Kate, meet me halfway. Does Optimus Prime need a commercial license?
First of all, thank you so much to whoever really blew up that over-the-top poster on this slide. Great question, Josh, because he is a semi-truck, which does not look unlike the truck that Sylvester Stallone drives in the classic, very serious drama Over the Top, which if you have not seen it, I highly recommend. So the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration defines a commercial motor vehicle as a vehicle used on a highway in interstate commerce to transport passengers or property. I think Prime could be like, that's not what I do, it's not what I'm here for, I'm not transporting goods in a commercial sense. So he could probably get away with it. If we want to look at Utah again, because they are talking all about these automated driving systems, it does say, the definition is similar, but it defines it as a vehicle designed or used to transport passengers or property. So Prime himself was not originally designed to transport passengers or property, but the truck that was scanned for him to turn into was. So, does he have an argument there? I don't know. It's possible he might be the only one who would have to get a driver's license in Utah. So, there we go. As far as, oh sorry, Josh, were you going to set me up?
Let's talk about everyone's favorite demilitarized zone, the DMV.
I really was hoping that some artist out there had made an image of Optimus Prime, like sitting at the DMV, but I couldn't find one. So if any artists are in the audience, please make that for me. So it's going to kind of depend. Most states say any person operating a motor vehicle has to have that vehicle registered. So again, it kind of comes down to personhood. But there are some differences as well. Colorado requires registration within 60 days of purchase, which seems like a pretty big loophole as far as gifts and stuff go. Like, I dug into the statute and couldn't find them closing that loophole anywhere, but whatever. They could be like, we didn't purchase ourselves, so. And then finally, Utah, going back to our old friend Utah, it does say that unless accepted, a person or automated driving system may not operate without having the vehicle be registered. So they are all going to have to get registered in Utah instead of the DMV.
So Mark, besides destroying my childhood, is destroying a Transformer murder?
Well, the problem is, are they persons or people? And as Kate said, by definition, they wouldn't be, because as we say at the bottom of the screen, they are sentient beings, cybertronic, mechanized life forms from whatever planet this was, Cybertron, wherever the heck that is, somewhere in the universe. So the murder statutes, which go by state, there is a federal one, but I picked California since we were here. I'm not practicing law in the state of California without a license, because I'm not licensed here, so I just merely put it on the screen, and it talks about another person. But there's a caveat to that, of course, because we know, next slide, we know there are sentient beings out there who could be considered persons, and I think TED 2 dramatizes that better than anything else, because it is a real-life situation, of course. But there's also actually a lot of people who are animal rights advocates who have been trying to raise the level of particularly domesticated dogs and cats to be persons under the law for purposes of prosecution for cruelty to animals. So that is moving. Now, the problem is, Ted is this sentient being from some godlike lightning beam or something like that caused him, or thunderstorm, and even though his mechanized function only, has him say something if you push his belly. I forget what he said when he was on trial in the courtroom there. So that's not the same thing. So the next one is, though, what might come into being, and I didn't know about this till we were doing this panel. So Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to Sophia, pictured there, in 2017, who is a robot, born and bred. robots. So this issue is becoming complicated as time will go by. So right now, if you kill a transformer, you're probably safe, except for the fact that they'll probably extract revenge on you. But other than that, nope, they're not yet persons, but they smile. So how much further behind can this be that they're going to be people under the law?
And also check out the original comic, issue 3, that had Spider-Man in it, that raised the issue of it's not dead like the way you think about it. So they do view life and death differently than we do. So let's talk about child endangerment. Mike.
To sum up, Spark loves losing custody. Transformers rolled out in 84, I rolled out in 73, so I'm about 10 or 11. And everything about Transformers was cool to a 10-year-old. Robots, cool. They become sports cars, cool. They become planes, cool. They eventually become dinosaurs. They become insects. And then start talk about the Constructicons that form together from one giant. Cool across the board. And then my best friend came back from Mexico with a bunch of fireworks. And the battle for Cybertron became very intense when we come back from. On that, and at this time, my brother was about the same age as Spike. And of course, when you're 10 years old, your older brother is your hero. So everything I thought Spike did was really cool. I'm now 50. I'm looking out, where is this boy's mother? He works full-time on an oil derrick at 14. And he gets sent up against the Decepticons, whose one goal, besides stealing all our energy, is to destroy the puny human flesh creatures. So, let's take a look at who's going to jail. Now, I'm choosing California for my venue because, although the comic book place is in Oregon, you look at the cartoon, they're in the desert. And when Teletran goes out to copy people after the 4 million years they've been on Earth, it goes to copy the vehicles that are around to make them fit in the best. Now, where would you go to the desert where all the cars around you are Porsches, Ferraris, and like, we're in Abu Dhabi. We gotta be there. But then they make the worst bad guy, Megatron, they make him do giant guns. So I'm like, okay, we're in the United States. And so I placed it in California because that's where we have deserts and that's where we got oil derricks off the coast. Now, looking at this penal code, I'm not gonna read it aloud. Assuming that they're persons, the words we're going to hone in that attorneys always look at is willfully. Did anybody willfully send him into danger? Every single episode. That boy is in trouble a lot. And then, was he put in danger? Yeah. So, somebody's going to jail. And as you, my next topic, it's going to be Ratchet. Ratchet's going to spend a lot of time in jail. Then you got to ask the question, how did he even get a job on an oil derrick? The kid's 14. So, when I looked at like what the code is, it actually reads just like Green Eggs and Ham. If you're looking about what can someone that's under 16 do. You cannot work on a railroad, you cannot work on a boat. You cannot work with too much dust, you cannot drive a bus. Anything you do to Green Eggs and Ham, you can't do when you're under 16. And you also have to attend school. Anybody see Spike ever crack a textbook? No. And then, this is the last one I looked up. Apparently there was a time when there was trouble with people under 16 being contortionists in California. So some of the assembly wrote a law that got sponsored, got sent to the Senate, got put in front of the governor. The governor is, yes, there are too many tightrope walking 14-year-olds. We are going to ban this. But you say, on the next slide, you might think, but blank, what if he's emancipated? And at 14, you can become emancipated from your parents and work a full-time job. I don't know, an oil derrick. And unfortunately, we don't have enough information to see if we've made all these. But from what it looks like, I think he's still living with his dad, so he misses that criteria, so more than likely he's not been emancipated. So, yeah, Spike's going to be a word of the state of California.
Conversely, it could be taking place in Arkansas, where they do want children working. So
Yes, their hands fit in the mechanism so much better when they're small.
exactly. So Katrina, let's talk about pile driving.
Yes, let's. So Rumble's arms can transform into powerful pile drivers. So what is the damage we're talking about here? What property damage specifically? So we see that you can level a power plant to scrap for raw materials for the Decepticon HQ and More Than Meets the Eye Part 1. And then in SOS at Dinobots episode, he bashes the ground, breaking off the cliff face, sending the Autobots crashing into the raging waters. So again, what kind of damage is this? In issue 2, Power Play, we are told the drum-like construction in Rumble's body rolls, transmitting through his feet immense low-frequency ground waves that the result is not unlike a small earthquake. So who might be liable for the property damage resulting from Rumble's earthquakes? The cartoon gives us the timestamp for the law to apply, showing us the transformers are reawakened in 1984 by volcanic eruption, which was around the time the regulatory framework for earthquakes began to emerge, in California specifically due to the 1971 San Fernando earthquake, which resulted in the promulgation of the Alquist-Criolla Act that created fault zones that we all know today with the goal of reducing losses from surface fault rupture. And it passed building codes and adopted rules regarding risk notices. We've been talking about a lot of who's going to be liable between the transformers today. But what if you're a property owner and you own a home and Rumble comes along and does this damage? What does that mean? In general, in California, you're not going to be liable for damages caused by a natural disaster. But would the law consider Rumble to be natural? It certainly would be a disaster, but maybe not necessarily a natural one. And building owners would still be responsible for the safety of their property, and they can't be liable if they fail to update their premises or install standard earthquake prevention measures. Also at the local level, our city attorney over here to our right, city ordinances also have seismic retrofit ordinances for public safety. And this has been demonstrated in a 2010 California appellate court opinion, where a jury decision upheld the $2 million that was awarded to the 2 salespeople's families that were killed. They were unfortunately crushed in a 111-year-old building during an earthquake, and those building owners were found negligent. An inspection report revealed deficiencies, so it's safe to assume that the same logic would apply even if Rumble was the one causing the earthquakes. Finally, would insurance cover it? Insurance companies refer to natural disasters as acts of God, which are generally defined as events not preventable by reasonable care or foresight and outside of human control. So because of that definition, Rumble's destruction is much more likely to qualify, and you probably would be able to get insurance coverage for it under your homeowner's policy. However, if you're in an earthquake-prone area, such as LA or anywhere that act I talked about previously defined as a fault zone, you will need a separate rider for additional coverage in addition to your typical policy.
Thank you. So, Kathy Spike Steinman, can you tell me about the dream scenario where alien robots find dinosaur bones?
So this gives me a chance to talk about the Dinobots. In the SOS Dinobots episode, the Autobots discovered dinosaur fossils in their base, which is the dormant volcano Mount St. Hilary, and they scanned the fossils and used that as a basis to create the Dinobots. So assuming this occurs in 1984, what laws would have existed at that time that would have regulated the discovery of dinosaur fossils and artifacts? And I'm not going to go into whether or not it was scientifically accurate for the types of fossils they discovered to be discovered in the same place. That's a different panel of experts. But if Mount St. Hilary was part of the national park system, there are several laws that would govern how those lands are managed. Most of the information that is available on the internet about Mount St. Hilary is actually related to this episode. Really? I can't find any other information about it other than related to Transformers. But it apparently is an active stratovolcano in Hood River County, Oregon, which is about 50 miles east of Portland. And it's in the Cascade Range of mountains, which is home to many national parks or otherwise protected lands. So it's likely that Mount St. Hilary is either a part of a national, state, or local park, or is otherwise some sort of government-protected lands. So if it's a federal park, or a national park, the National Park Service Organic Act of 1916, so this is way before 1984, says that the fundamental purpose of these parks is to conserve the scenery and the natural and historic objects and the wildlife therein, and to provide for their enjoyment in the same manner so that everyone else can pretty much enjoy them, right? So we want to keep them intact so everybody can enjoy them. We also have the Antiquities Act of 1906, which also protects historic and prehistoric ruins or monuments or any objects of antiquity that are on lands controlled by the federal government. The, sorry, I lost my We also have the Paleontological Resources Preservation Act. That's in 2009, so after 1984, but it also prohibits, it actually goes into more depth about what it protects and more specific, and actually has civil and criminal penalties associated with manhandling dinosaur fossils or inappropriately handling them. It prohibits the possession, destroying, injuring, defacing, removing, digging, or disturbing non-fossilized and fossilized paleontological specimens, culture, or archaeological resources or parts thereof. So it doesn't mean if necessarily that you have to find the whole fossil to be in violation of that. Even if you find a finger, that's still subject to this act. The act also governs, it was enacted by the it was enacted by the government to authorize the Department of Agriculture and Department of Interior to manage and protect these paleontological resources using scientific principles and expertise, and has specific mandates and guidelines for issuing research and collecting permits and the curation of fossils in museum collections. So if you're on a federal park and you see, even if it's like a snake skin or something like that, you have to have a permit to be able to take that. So for those of you who were either Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, you can remember the leave no trace, right? That's very important. The Paleontological Resources Protection Act prohibits possessing, destroying, did I go over this? Injuring, defacing, digging, or disturbing non-fossilized and fossilized paleontological specimens. Oh, I did go over that, sorry. So remember though, if you're visiting our national parks, respect the lands, respect the people who occupied those lands, and also don't go viral doing something stupid that you shouldn't be doing. Not only isn't respectful to the lands that you're on, but also it might be a crime.
So Katrina, is Earth at war with the Decepticons?
This is actually me,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but it's okay. We're similar, yeah. Kate, Kathy, Katrina, we're all, yeah.
There are a lot of cases.
Let's find out, shall we?
Engage.
Thank you. I'm going to focus on the attack on Sherman Dam for this, because otherwise it just gets way too broad. So we're just going to focus on this one attack that happens in More Than Meets the Eye Part 2, which Katrina kind of touched on already. Rumble goes in there, he starts doing his Rumble thing, and they push a bunch of water through this dam so that they can get as much energy out of it as possible to get Energon cubes. These Energon cubes they are hoping to use as fuel to get back to Cybertron, and then also once they are on Cybertron, they're going to use them to help them overthrow the Autobots when they are there. So, what is an act of war? The US Code defines act of war as any act occurring in the course of declared war, armed conflict, whether or not war has been declared between two or more nations, or armed conflict between military forces of any origin. Now, I don't have time to define and analyze armed conflict, so we're going to say, like, yeah, that's happening. I think that we have an argument under either B or C. There is no war were not declared, unlike the first slide that I had up there. So we aren't at war under A, but maybe under B or C. So under Section B, is there an armed conflict between two nations? So Cybertron is the nation, but the Autobots are also from Cybertron, and we're not really in a conflict with them. It's more like a Cybertronian civil war that just happens to be taking place here on Earth, and Earth is collateral damage. So would we call this an armed conflict between Earth or the US and Cybertron? I don't know, that feels a little hinky to me. So let's see about Section C. Are the Decepticons a military force? This is where I think we have a strong argument. The Decepticons were initially built as military hardware robots. The Autobots were designed to be civilian. They also transform into military jets and vehicles a lot once they're on Earth. They are certainly armed. They're built in military design. They also have been in an active armed conflict with the Autobots for 5 million years, so I would say they're a pretty seasoned military force. They actually won their first war against the Autobots because of their superior military training and knowledge. I think they are pretty squarely a military force, unless we consider them terrorists. Terrorist organizations are not considered military forces under this definition, so what's a terrorist organization? Terrorism, an act of terrorism, is defined as an activity that involves a violent act or act dangerous to human life, property, or infrastructure, and appears to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population or to get a government to do something, basically. So, Is the attack on Sherman Dam an act of terror? Did it involve a violent act or act dangerous to human life, property, or infrastructure? Yes, you can see the wall of water is starting to rush toward this farmhouse. People are hiding on their roofs. Oh my gosh, definitely fits into Section A. Section B is a little bit trickier. Are they trying to intimidate or coerce the civilian population of Earth? No, not really. They're just trying to get their energon cubes and get back to Cybertron. They're also not really trying to influence the government either of Earth or the US or the Autobots. They're not holding the dam workers hostage and saying, give us back control of Cybertron or the dam workers get it. They're not really trying to do any of these things. So I think it's more of an act of war than an act of terror. So in that case, was it a war crime? Let's find out. Or not, because I'm probably going to conclude with the lawyerly answer, which is it depends. If we're saying they're at war is a war crime, I think it probably is, because per the International Criminal Court Statute, Article 8.2b, war crimes do include intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, which are objects that are not military objectives. And military objectives are objects that basically are making a big contribution to the military effort. So is the dam maybe supplying military base? Possibly. Do the Decepticons know that? No, probably not. And I don't think they care. So I think they are just doing this to get what they need, and it would be considered a war crime.
So Mark, let's talk about the first Transformers comic I picked up, issue 7, and the contract issue in that.
So, Transformers issue 7 would have been on the newsstands in January of 1985, cover date April. And Ratchet, the medical doctor of the Autobots, is, of course, he's the last one surviving of the Autobots who have all been captured by the Decepticons. Of course, he has Spike with him, endangering the child while he takes on Optimus Prime. We learn from the that the Dinobots had defeated Shockwave millions of years ago, and Shockwave has come back to life. And he has now ruled over Megatron, and Megatron is really pissed off about that because he's very egotistical. So, as Megatron is about to kill, not necessarily murder, kill Ratchet, Ratchet offers him a deal. And unfortunately, the text is not good enough for me to read what it is, but essentially, Ratchet says to Megatron, hey, I can help you defeat Shockwave so you can take over again, and if you do that, you will wake up and allow me to repair all my fellow Autobots, including Optimus Prime, who's just ahead, floating in another cave. And he says, that sounds great, I accept your offer. So, in my world, in the federal government and national security, I don't deal with contracts very much because the government can do whatever the heck it wants and just cancel for the convenience of the government. Now, since I am licensed in New York, I chose New York. And actually, here's what he wrote. Your only other choice, make a deal with me, promise to return the Ark and the Autobots to me, and in exchange, I'll destroy Shockwave. And he goes, I think you're playing with me, but he goes, I agreed to your terms. So to me, there's an offer, clearly. There's acceptance. There's consideration between both of them. There's clearly mutual assent, and there's definitely intent to be bound. So that's a contract. I haven't taken it since first year of law school, 35 years ago, but that sounds like a contract to me, at least in the state of New York. Now, they're already thinking, because I wanted to know what the heck happened in this. So you have to go to the next issue, into issue 8. And Ratchet's already talking about how, well, my moral code requires me to be bound by these contracts, but that's only between Autobots, and he's not an Autobot, so there's no contract. But before he had to break out of that contract, of course, Megatron double-crossed him and broke the contract. So we didn't have to worry about that at all. Now, before we go to the next slide, I will say I'm the oldest one on our panel here, and a few years can make a difference. So when Transformers came out, I was in my senior year of high school I was a comic book dealer that year. I remember selling the Transformers being a new comic, but I did not watch the television cartoon series. I've been in trial for the last 2 weeks watching this 40-year-old cartoon series. I'm glad I did not watch it necessarily when I was 17. I don't think it would have fit. But as I'm watching these episodes, I was just floored because all I heard was frickin' Hong Kong Phooey's voice, who was Scatman Crothers doing the voice, and Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, who was Casey Kasem, and I'm pretty damn sure I heard a whole bunch of Cylons from Battlestar Galactica being Autobot. No, Decepticons, I think, because that would have been more evil. So it was a very interesting experience. I can't get beyond the Hong Kong Phooey voices coming out of Autobots. That was just really too strange.
There are also sound effects from both Star Trek and Star Wars in it as well. So, Mike, let's talk about some IP law.
All right. Just to go in, if you look at the names across, we can kind of figure this out as we're forming our panel. We are like the lawyer version of Bill and DeVoe. Like, we are Katie, Mark, and Mike. So when we do our musical episode, this will be probably the same panel on it. I know this came out when I was 10, different experience than Mark. Of course, when you're 10 years old, they were the Autobots and the Paragons. We'll do it. And I still make the transforming sound when I see a convertible go back into the car. And if you can all do it with me, you all know the sound. It's ow. All secret done that in your head if you didn't do it with me. Anyway, I'm not an intellectual property attorney, but like all the rest of the attorneys in this room, you see kind of a legal issue. Like being an attorney has kind of ruined you for reading books, watching shows. You see legal issues everywhere. So I saw this like, okay, the first thing they do when they wake up after 4 million years is copy all these trademarks out there so they can be in disguise. And of course, the better, the more they rip off, the better the disguise. So like, there's gotta be maybe something wrong with this. And just the way I'm looking at this is if the cartoon is a documentary, that there are actually Transformers walking among us, because there are a whole lot of IP issues when it comes to toy manufacturers versus the auto manufacturers. What can be used? I mean, there's a reason that Bumblebee, who was a Volkswagen Bug in the cartoon, becomes a Camaro when the first movie comes out. And that has a lot to do with IP law, like what did Bumblebee do to have Shia LaBeouf make out on top of his hood? So, and insult to injury. So, Bumblebee transforms into the exact copy of the 1970 Volkswagen Bug and Jazz, Scatman Crothers, into the exact likeness of 1976 Porsche 935. And this one question, are they infringing on IP, could take up an entire semester, and I'm going to do it in 4 minutes. So here we go. Basically, we have the Lanham Act, and this protects trade dress, because normally with cars, different protections apply to different things. You have copyright for the car design itself, you have the logo, that's going to be a trademark, and mechanical inventions that make the car go, that's going to be patents. But when it comes to car, you're looking at trade dress. And what trade dress is what makes you distinct so that when I see you, I know who made it. So if I hold up this bottle, do you see a bottle of water, or do you see Aquafina? So in this case, probably not a trade dress is a bottle. So basically, it comes down to 3 elements. Looking at the last part of it is, are they likely to confuse the consumer? And is the trade dress protected? Meaning, is it something that's non-functional, and is it something that is acquired secondary meaning? So looking at this, what does that mean? Like, attorneys would love to hone in on certain words. And so it goes, what does it mean to be inherently distinctive? And that means, is it something that sets you apart? When you look at a Volkswagen Bug, do you see car, or do you see Volkswagen? When you look at a product, do you see what the product is, or do you see who made it? And that's the big distinction that has to be made. I take all the logos off, all the things the Transformers transform into. Do I still know what it is? Yeah. Jazz, your Porsche. Bumblebee, your Volkswagen Bug. So then what's protected? It has to be non-functional. And so this is like not a door handle. Cars need tires. Cars need wheels. Cars need steering wheel. That stuff's not going to be protected. The fins on a Chevy, they do absolutely nothing for uniforms to the car, but they look really cool. So that is protected trade dress. So it comes down to, are they in violation of this? First glance, it kind of looks like they are. The better the disguise, the more they look like the thing they're infringing on, the more likely there are to confuse somebody. Are these protected items? Yeah, it's a bug, it's a Porsche, that kind of thing. Where they get off the hook is that they're not deceiving consumers. Nobody is rolling into a car lot thinking they bought a VW bug and are rolling out with a robot. They might be in trouble because you have no idea how they're having income, because they're not working jobs. They've been doing this stuff for years. They need to replenish everything. They're not selling like T-shirts and stuff and all that stuff. So most likely you're not confusing the consumer, which is the big distinction in this. But someone has to go to jail. And I'm picking Ratchet again. I don't know why I like to put Ratchet in jail.
He's breaching contracts.
Ratchet's in trouble all over the place.
There is actually a special law that it's universal. It's not just the United States. The United States has codified it itself. You cannot use the Red Cross symbol unless you're a member of the Red Cross. If you do, you're going to jail. Now Ratchet wants to look as most like he can like an ambulance when he's in disguise. So he was using the Red Cross symbol. He's in violation. Now this is especially concerning to any game developers out there, because you always like to put the health thing that you get, you want to make it look like a medical kit, so you always put the Red Cross on it. This is why in better games, the box will be green, or they'll call it something else, or they'll reverse the color so it looks like the Swiss flag instead of one. And this is because we don't want to dilute what the Red Cross symbol is. We always want it to be something that's associated with Red Cross so they can cross war lines. Go in, everyone knows who they are. They don't want to dilute that, so they want to cover that up. So, Steve in the front row who sells the toys can probably tell you, you're not going to find a lot of the original Ratchets that have still that emblem on it. It's more of a collector item you want to be able to find that actual toy on this. So that's somewhat of infringement. And this is my favorite part. The next slide is in the comics, you eventually get a Decepticon named Exhaust, who works for the evil company Marlboro. Not Marlboro, Marlboro. Intentionally misspelled. He is a very stressed out Decepticon, and to relax, he smokes. He's a precursor to e-cigarettes. And his special power is he can turn into exhaust fumes. And what's great about the coloring is that when he transforms from a car back into a robot, he looks like a giant pack of cigarettes. This is a children's comic. Joe the Camel's like going, what the heck? I got canceled. And Philip Morris actually has gone around trying to get the toy companies to stop producing it because will be in violation of targeting children with their product, which they can't do anymore. And that is exactly what Exhaust is doing.
So Kathy, do the Autobots own the volcano they crashed into?
All right, so I chose this topic because it allows me to talk about one of the more interesting topics in property law, which is actually boring, but adverse possession. So by show of hands, who's heard of legal theory adverse possession? Oh, quite a few people. Who's heard of squatters' rights? Most people have heard of that. Okay, so this is sort of what we're talking about. Adverse possession is based on a common law principle that someone who may not have legal title to a piece of property can actually claim legal ownership if they meet certain criteria. So as we mentioned, the ARC cruiser crashes into Mount St. Hilary, and it crashes 4 million years ago, 4 million years ago. And Mount St. Hilary is in the Cascade Mountains near Portland. The cruiser remains there undisturbed until 1984 when the volcano erupts, which somehow reactivates the transformers, and then the Autobots use the volcano as their base. So can they claim the ownership rights of the volcano under the theory of adverse possession? So let's get to what you actually have to prove in order to claim a piece of property under adverse possession. Under Oregon statutes, you can acquire title by adverse possession if, 1, the person has maintained actual, open, notorious, exclusive, hostile, and continuous possession of the property for a period of 10 years. That was a word salad, we'll get into it. At the time that the person claiming ownership first possessed the property, they had the honest belief that they were the actual owner of the property, and that belief, 1, continued throughout the vesting period, so the 10 years. It had an objective basis and was reasonable under the circumstances. And they also have to prove this, each of these requirements by clear and convincing evidence. All right, so did they have actual, open, notorious, exclusive, hostile, and continuous possession of the property for a period of 10 years? So, well, we know they've been there for 4 million years. They've acted like they've owned it. They Wheeljack sets up armaments around the base to protect it, and it doesn't appear that anyone else lives there. So, did they have an honest, objective, and reasonable belief that they owned the volcano for 10 years? That's a little bit trickier. It's unclear whether or not they actually believe that they own this property, right? Are they just colonizers that are there and are claiming ownership because they're planting a flag, even though it might be owned by somebody else? Are they refugees seeking asylum? It's unclear for the comics. So I think they'll have a little bit harder time proving that element to gain title to the property. But there's also some exceptions to adverse possession. So even if they had proven all these things, if it's government property, you cannot claim adverse possession against the government. And there's a reason for that, because the government owns so much land, right? They can't keep track of all of it. They can't go out and monitor every property, every acre that they own, right? So you cannot claim adverse possession against the government just because it's impractical and impossible sometimes for them to go out and say, hey, you shouldn't be here, you need to go.
Thank you. Katrina, let's talk about Energon as the solution to the energy crisis.
I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions, so we'll quickly go through this. But having drained Cybertron, the Transformers make their way to Earth, and they start siphoning all sorts of energy input, like oil and magma and steam, and then in issue 14, the not so conventional energy input, which is rock and roll. A rock and roll concert, specifically a brick spring horn concert, to your IV issues, where they have to plan to siphon the energy from a concert to what everybody else has been talking about before, whether using it for destruction or getting it back home. Issue 14 was also the first time that Energon cubes showed up in the comic, unless someone wants to correct me, which was widely used in the cartoon, so it's kind of the first time that elements of the franchise converge. And what we know is they place some sort of siphoning tool next to the energy source, drain the power, and then somehow it's automatically converted into a very pretty cube that has incredible energy potential. It says that 1,000 barrels of oil can be stored in a single Energon cube. So depending on which resource you're taking and how and why, it potentially could be the solution to the energy crisis, as long as you're not just stealing, potentially if you could steal all energy from the rock and roll concerts, then yeah, potentially that would be an incredible way to go about it. But siphoning generally, gash and dash, is like a larceny when people siphon gas from cars, depending on the felony threshold. There's also trespassing and aggravated trespassing issues and nuisance as well, but we can talk about that after if you'd like. I want to give you guys enough time to ask any questions you might have.
And this was from the time when Bruce Springsteen would do 5-hour concerts, so just imagine.
5-hour energy.
Yeah, he doesn't do that anymore. So, thank you. We will be in room 780 tomorrow night for Law of the Acolyte. And now it's questions for you. We have 6 minutes. Questions about Transformers. Yes, ma'am.
You've made a terrible mistake. Okay, in the cartoon, there's a 2-parter episode called Megatron's Master Plan, where he impersonates, defames, and then holds like a mock trial with the humans, and he sends the Autobots off Earth, and then he sabotages them to try and throw them into the sun. And so, we're dealing with, he is obviously defaming
But we do have Dr. Actville starting Enslaving Humans, and starting with Sparkplug and all of the guys who look like Sparkplug. And it's like that's all war crime territory. So yeah, there's a lot there. There are things that we can blog about and podcast about, but it's a target-rich environment with 40 years of history.
And that judge should be reviewed by someone.
Yeah, that's not how the law works.
Blast him in the sun, why not?
There's no lawyer for the Autobots. They hold a kangaroo court and they send them into space.
So
Have you thought about going to law school?
yes. Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't it be argued that Ratchet made the contract unrecorded?
Could Ratchet have made the contract with Megatron under
Ooh, under
duress?
duress as he's
Yeah.
facing being destroyed.
He literally said that he was going to kill them right before that.
Duress is not consideration. So
It,
that-
but it is usually the duress would be that the person was forced into the contract, not the person who's offering to enter into the contract.
So that's the point, yeah.
So I think it probably still is a valid contract under that scenario. But that's an excellent point, and you should go to law school. Yes.
Yes. Is Rumble red or blue? In the comic, or excuse me, the cartoon, is more purple. And in the comic book, I thought it was red and blue, but
Not a legal question. That's my opinion.
I think that was a mistake, they said, right? It was a mistake in the way they put the cartoon out, which upset a lot of people and confused a bunch of people. But yes, we should probably go with what the comic says, but that's up to you. What do you think? What color is Rumble?
shrunk. Okay, we can go look at the toy. Yes, in the back. Would the Antiquities Act apply to the Transformers because they've been crashed for 4 million years? God, that's good.
I didn't hear the question. What was that?
Does the Antiquities Act of 1906 apply to the Transformers because they crashed 4 million years ago?
So
But they
if-
discovered the fossils in 1984.
Yeah, but
What
the
if-
fact
what
that
if-
they
No, but the
don't-
Transformers
If
themselves.
humans
Oh.
tried to excavate transformer parts when the
That's it.
Transformers
Is it
were
culture?
somewhere
Or the art.
else.
Is it culture? I mean, we're here. This is a pop culture convention.
That's a good question.
Dark Side
There's
of the
one
Moon.
here.
Yeah, okay, a lot there. There was another.
There's one here in the front.
Yes.
A lot of times in the cartoons, the Autobots reference Bumblebee as a kid. So if Bumblebee is actually a child, is Optimus Prime technically enforcing, like having a child soldier? In the Civil War? You could argue that with Rumble.
They said that he's like at least a 4 million year old child soldier.
It's probably going to be a personhood question again.
So the question is Bumblebee a child soldier? I don't
I love that.
Even with the Bumblebee movie, they reference him being young, and you could be the 19-year-old soldier and still be the kid. So I think we're in that category. Yes.
Is OSHA cool with like all the companions having hard hats? It's all good with Autobots.
So, Big Oil is the hero in this. And our time is up. We'll be outside to answer other questions. Thank you all.
Thank you. Do anything.